Hi everyone. I want to take a few minutes to go over my favorite books of 2022, and these books will be presented in no particular order. So the first book is Muscle Horse by Nate Garcia. I did a pretty lengthy review of this book, and it's still one of my favorite books of the year. It is just so well done on a storytelling level, on an art level, on a writing level, production. The just overall quality is really amazing. I mean, this is like, like a lot of young cartoonists, they do good work and it gets better, and then they finally do like some kind of work that kind of says, "Hey, I'm here." And for me, this was that book. I've been following Nate for a little over 2 years now. Um, I love his work. I like everything he does. But if you ever haven't read any of his work and you want to read something and see what he can do, this is the book. Again, one of my favorites. Next up are the first two issues of The Devil's Grin by Alex Graham. Alex is serializing this on her Substack, and then 30 days afterwards, the strips appear on Instagram. And at certain points, she's collecting the pages that have been printed, and then she's making comics out of them. And there's these really nicely made magazine size, comics. They're black and white inside. I really like her 6-panel approach here. It works really well. The quality of these books is really good. And Alex, I first encountered her work when she was publishing the Dog Biscuits on Instagram before it saw print. And I just fell in love with that book. I own a piece of original art from that book, and I consider her one of my favorite cartoonists. So these books come out after she's collected them. paid Substack subscribers get a chance at first dibs of ordering these books, and then they come, first serve to anybody that's interested in getting them. They're limited to like 250 copies, I believe. They're great books. She has a unique style. Her storytelling is also unique. It's very interesting. It's very layered. Her work works well in these collections, but it also works well as far as a longer series of books, like a long graphic novel. These are great. I know that you can find these in the aftermarket, I think, but they sell out pretty quick. I can tell you that much. But again, I put these both here because I enjoyed both of these, and the setup of the story is great. Eventually, it will be collected into a graphic novel, but I like these larger magazine size pages. To me, it's just the art really shines in the large format. Next is this book, God Hates Me. This is an excerpt from a book called American Cult, and this was part of the Birdcage Bottom Kickstarter. And I really like this story because it's based on a true story of a young woman who was kicked out of the Westboro Baptist Church, and showing up how they grew up normal, and then how her dad got into the church, and then how it controlled all her life. And it's really interesting. And when I read this, I was like, I gotta get this book. And I haven't gotten this book. And so when I was looking through my books to try to decide what's on the list for 2022, I remembered this book because it's a great story. The art fits the book, the story really well. And I remember reading it at the end and saying, oh, I gotta get this. So, don't know if you can still get it through Birdcage Bottom Books, but this is a great excerpt. But the book that's really part of is this one called American Cult. And I think that's got to be on my post-Christmas list, definitely. Anyway, Birdcage Bottom Books, they did I remember this, and part of my rationale for my favorite books are books that really stick with me and make me want to buy work. And this definitely did. Next, we have Joseph Smith and the Mormons and As a Cartoonist by Noah Van Sciver. Both books were published earlier this year. Both are great. Both are completely different in storytelling approach, in themes. It's amazing to me that this is like if a musician came out with 2 albums in the same year that were different types of albums, but they were both great. That's a hard trick to pull. Joseph Smith and the Mormons got a lot of great critical acclaim. It's an excellent book. I was going to do a video review of this, but there's just so much meat in here that I didn't think I could condense it without it just losing something. But this should be on everybody's to read list if you haven't read it yet. It's just an outstanding, excellent book. This is an achievement. And as a cartoonist published by Fantagraphics earlier this year was also excellent. This is more like this. That's the themes of growing up, themes of being a father, but there's also a love letter to cartooning. He starts off the book with these portraits of very famous cartoonists from the 20th century, and then you have this book, and I actually did a review of this, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. This is an excellent book, and at the end, he just writes, a few comics along the way that have guided me along the way. And these are all excellent books. It's just amazing to me. I mean, there's books by Jaime Hernandez, Ernie Bushmiller, Julie Doucet, Gilbert Hernandez, Adrian Tomina, Chester Brown. This is like you could just use as a checklist of 65 great comics you want to read. Again, this is a great book. And if you haven't read it, you should. Power Wash by Josh Penninger was a book that I really liked. Features Tedward, the character that he debuted in Goiter Comics 7. And it's just a great book. I mean, first of all, it's just very well made. It's self-published. Josh has always had a great sense of color and how he colors his books. But this black and white book, it's just very nice. I get Jaime Hernandez vibes here. Art's very good. The story is it's kind of weird and a little bizarre, but not too bizarre, but it's bizarre, like it's bizarre but funny, and there is humor in here. And some of his work, especially I love his use of blacks. A lot of people don't know how to like this is again like a Jaime Hernandez use of blacks, and his black and white work is really stellar here. I love the shadows here. Just a solid book. It's strange. It's bizarre. It's funny. It's dramatic. And again, just really beautiful use of color. This is a great book. I believe it's still available. Not sure if directly from Josh or through some stores, but if you can, you should get this. This is Josh has been making comics for a lot of years, and this is one of those books that come out and that people who know who Josh were say, yeah, man, this is great, and people who didn't know are like, hey, man, this Josh Penninger is pretty cool. It's pretty good. So, I mean, he is pretty cool. So, if you have a chance to get this or read this, I would recommend it. Definitely. Next is The Crimson Cage. This is a 5-issue miniseries I did a review on by AWA Upshot. This is a wrestling story that takes place in the early 80s, but it's also has horror elements and is basically as the creators wrote it. They said it was wrestling meets Macbeth, and I've read Macbeth. So it does a really good job with the wrestling portion and capturing the real spirit and that vibe of the industry in the early 80s. And it does that nice balance between showing the business how it really is, but also showing, some of the, for lack of a better word, kayfabe, and kayfabe means that you're making the wrestling look like it's unscripted. And it does a really nice balance of that. The art is really good. And most wrestling comics, I'm just going to be honest, are bad. Either the art isn't there, the wrestlers look too ripped, the storytelling isn't there, the writing isn't there. This has it all. The wrestlers look like wrestlers of those days. They capture the vibe of the independent territory days of the early 80s. Again, just a really good, solid book. I believe the trade paperback is like $12.99. It's really inexpensive, and I would say that instead of getting 3 mediocre Marvel comics or DC comics, you could get the trade of this. This is just a really well done story. Again, I think a lot of wrestling comics fans just will buy and say it's awesome, but I've been watching wrestling since probably probably since I can remember. I grew up within Championship Wrestling from Florida, maybe since 1970, 71, 72. And most of them, I'm a fan, but most of the comics just don't work. They're not good. This is an exception. You should definitely check and read this. It's just a good story, period. Again, it has a lot of Macbeth elements, a lot of horror elements, and this is something that, most wrestling comics, like, people say, oh, it's wrestling, but this is actually a really good, solid comic, period. Next is Talk to My Back by Yamada Murasaki. This is a collection of manga, serialized manga from 1978 to 1986, published by John Corley, translated by Ryan Holmberg. And since it's translated by Ryan Holmberg, it includes one of those really deep dive, very in-depth, well-researched essays that not only explain the book, but explains more the place and time it was going on, other works that were going on at the time, and kind of shows you like how this book fit in the cultural zeitgeist of the time in Japan. Very fascinating as always. But this is a series of strips, and it basically features a Japanese housewife, and the story starts off where she's at home being a housewife. She doesn't work, because a lot of these families, at least, back then the man worked and the woman just stayed at home and took care of the kids. And then you can see her feelings of frustration of just being a housewife. She can do more. There's themes of dealing with infidelity, dealing with the limitations of Japanese culture upon women, of raising children in that kind of environment, and then finding personal growth and being a bit of a maverick, but being successful and becoming her own person, even to the point where she actually, here she's always having long hair, and then here she just, cuts her hair shorter, more trendy. It's really well done series of books. There's a lot of manga that's published every year. A lot of it I have not read, but I can definitely say that if you have not read this, you should. This has been in a lot of top 10 lists or a lot of best books of 2022. This is just my personal favorites of the year, but this definitely belongs there. It's just a great book. Another winner by John Corley and Ryan Holmberg. And lastly, A Frog in the Fall by Linea Sterte, published by PEOW Press. This was back to the crowdfunding, although there are issues available. This is just a really great, sweet book. I did a review on this, but it's just a lovely, sweet is the word that I can say. Not childish, not for little kids, but it's sweet. This could be a kid's book. This is an adult's book. I love the art style here because she uses a lot of negative space, like a manga where you just don't fill in much of the background, but she just does enough here and here just to kind of show you that it's not all blank, there's something going on. And just her art is great. But then when she has to, you'll see these pages where you'll see like a lot of detail and a real background drawn. Again, there's like a lot of manga style sensibilities to it. But then when she needs to, she can do a 2-page spread like this. And do these kind of spreads. It's just a sweet book. This is a great book. I would get it. It's just an excellent book. This is the kind of book you read and it kind of sticks in your mind. And when you see it, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that book. And it has a certain feeling that it gives you, at least with me. But again, this is just, Linea Sterte is a great cartoonist. I've read some of her other work. This is different from her other work. It's just a lovely book. And can't recommend it enough. And that's it. If you've read these books, I'd like your thoughts maybe. And more importantly, if you haven't read them, you should really check them out. I don't like to recommend comics that I think are mediocre. If they're popular or not, doesn't matter to me. This is just a great set of books. Great reading. Anyway, take care. Belated Happy Hanukkah, a Merry Christmas, and a happy, healthy, and prosperous New Year to all of you. Thanks.